Part 2. Let's just get into it. Normally, remember, read the question first without looking at the options if you're doing multiple choice, just because the options might confuse you if you haven't read the question properly yet. So save yourself some effort and just read the question and think about it before you look at the options. Because normally, if you understand the question well enough, in your head, you should come up with one of the options. So save yourself some panic and don't look at the options just yet every time. So give it a go by yourself, and I'll explain. So which of the following parts of the digestive system secrete proteases? Okay, proteases. We know proteases sounds like protein. Now, they are enzymes. Anything that ends in an ace like that, refers to an enzyme. And we know enzymes break things down. Specifically, this enzyme breaks down proteins. There are two types. Pepsin and endopeptidase. Both of these are proteases, and both of them are secreted in different places of your body. Pepsin is made by your stomach. So you know, as food comes down, the first place it goes is your stomach. So your stomach will make pepsin, which is going to break down your proteins first. Then later, your pancreas, so I'm going to show you an image here, your pancreas, so this is your pancreas, so we're zooming into this spot here. So this is your stomach. So the food is first broken down in your stomach by pepsin. Your food then comes into this thing here, which is the beginning of your small intestine. But these two, so your pancreas secretes some things into this blue pipe. So this blue pipe is the same thing as this red pipe. It's the small intestine. So the pancreas will release things into this small intestine. And one of the things it releases, as you can see, in this pancreatic juice is the endopeptidase. This enzyme, which is released by the pancreas into the small intestine, will break down your proteins further. Okay, so we know what these two do now. Let's see if any of the options work. So A says your stomach does release proteases. That is true. We know your stomach does because it releases pepsin. The small intestine, no. This is a tricky one. A lot of people will say yes because endopeptidase is technically in your small intestine, because we know the pancreas releases it into this blue pipe here, which is your small intestine. So don't get confused with this, because your small intestine itself does not release any proteases. It does not release any enzymes. It is the pancreas which releases the enzymes into the small intestine. So in this case, A would not be correct because the small intestine does not secrete proteases. Rather, the pancreas secretes proteases into the small intestine. Okay, so don't be confused by this one. And again, now we know this one is wrong already, but let's just confirm. The large intestine, no, so this one is also no, because the large intestine is not involved in digestion. It will not release any enzymes to break down food, because the large intestine is later. What it does is it absorbs water. So it has no role in digesting food. So it will not release any enzymes. Okay, so this is definitely wrong. So definitely not A. How about B? So again, yes, stomach. This one might be correct because yes, the small intestine does not secrete proteases. But again, nope, it's wrong because it says the large intestine secretes proteases. So definitely not. How about this one? Yes, no, no. Yes, so this is correct. Because we know the stomach releases pepsin, small intestine does not release anything, and the large intestine does not release any proteases. So this one is correct. Let's confirm that the last one is wrong. So they're saying no, the stomach does not release any proteases, so immediately that one is wrong. So I hope this makes sense. The only confusing thing here is that a lot of people think the small intestine releases proteases or enzymes, but in fact it does not release anything. It is rather the liver and the pancreas around it that releases things into it. Okay, so don't be confused about this one. Okay, let's move on to the next one. So try it by yourself again. Which of the following is correct for lipase? So lipase sounds like lipids, right? So we know it ends in ase, so it's an enzyme that's going to break down lipids. Now, what is correct for this one? Let's just go straight into it. A, the substrate. So substrate, remember, is the object that is going to be broken down. The source is where the enzyme comes from. The pH optimum is the pH at which this enzyme works the best. Okay? So is it A? Is the substrate triglycerides? Triglycerides is definitely the substrate. Lipase is triglycerides is another name for lipids, basically. It's another name for fat. It's a science name for fat. So it's the substrate, the thing that is going to be broken down, is definitely triglycerides. Where does lipase come from? Yes, it does come from the pancreas. So here we have the pancreas. It releases pancreatic juice, this red here. This pancreatic juice contains a whole lot of things, one of which is lipase. Okay? So far, the substrate is correct, the source is correct, and true, the pH is correct. So you can see the pH is a little bit above 7. We know that 7 is neutral. So why is it above 7? So the reason why it's above 7 slightly is because of another thing that the pancreas releases. The pancreas releases these 4 things, right? We know lipase is released, but also this thing here with the sun called bicarbonate. Bicarbonate makes the pH go up. So instead of being 7, like neutral, it will make the pH be above 7. So in this case, 8. Okay, so this is this one. So it should be A in theory. We'll quickly eliminate the rest. So why is it not B? The reason why it's not B is because fatty acids is not the substrate. Fatty acids is the broken down form of triglycerides. So you can see tri, right? Tri means 3. So fatty acids is one of the 3 glycerides. So when we have this big thing here, it is broken down into its 3 fatty acids, basically. So fatty acids is the product of the reaction, not the substrate. So you can't break down fatty acids anymore. It is the smallest form. Again, small intestine, this is again a tricky one. Nothing is released from the small intestine. The pancreas releases things into the small intestine. So tricky one. The pH, so if this one here happened to be 7, it can technically still be correct because the pH varies very slightly. Sometimes in the small intestine the pH is 7 or 8. They will tell you normally a range. It's normally not dead on 8. Okay, a more appropriate answer would be 7 to 8. Okay, so if they tell 7, technically it's not wrong. So the real reason why B is wrong is because of the small intestine part. Okay, how about C? So just know there's a range. It's between 7 to 8. Okay. How about C? Triglycerides. So we know that's correct to the substrate. Again, source is wrong. So this time the substrate is correct, but the source is also the source is wrong. It's not from the small intestine. And the pH is a little bit too high, I think. Okay, how about D? So here, D, fatty acids, again, that's not the substrate, that's the product. The source is correct, comes from the pancreas, and the pH seems a little bit high for me. So overall, it's gotta be A because the substrate is correct, the source is correct, and the pH seems appropriate. Okay, let's get 1 or 2 more. Let's see. What is true of the source? So you'll see, these kind of multiple choice questions, they always involve this kind of idea. Source, product, enzyme, pH. It's always going to be these kind of 4 things. Okay, so what is true of the source, products, and optimum pH of lipase found in the human digestive system? Okay, so try it by yourself. So again, source. And we're talking about lipase again. We just did a question on lipase, right? So you can see that in the IB, they really repeat questions. Questions kind of run out of questions. So if you do enough IB questions, in theory, you'll come across ones that you have done already. So the more you do IB questions, the better. So here we go. What's the source of lipase? I'm going to go through this one quickly because we just did a similar question above. So like I just said above, the source is the pancreas. So if we can just find the pancreas. C. That's the only one that says pancreas. So we know immediately it's C because lipase is not released from any of the other things. But we'll confirm it. So the source is correct. How about the products? So the products is fatty acids. The only difference from this question and the one above is the one above said substrate instead. So substrate is a thing to be broken down. Products is the broken down form of the substrate. So in this case, the substrate was triglycerides, which is correct. But now they're asking for the products, which we know is fatty acids. It's the broken down form. So yes, it is fatty acids. And the pH, again, the right pH. So this is correct. The these three are A, B, and D are incorrect because of the sources. Lipase is not released from salivary glands, the stomach, or the liver. Okay, that's why these are correct. A is because the product here for A is correct, and the pH is correct. For this one, the product, source, and the pH is incorrect. So B is just completely incorrect. The source incorrect, products incorrect, pH incorrect. So it's gotta be C. Okay, let's do one more, I think. So what are the features of the enzyme amylase? Give it a go. So just like protease, amylase has two sources. It can either be made in the saliva, which is in your mouth, or in the pancreas. Okay, so amylase, when you think amylase, don't think of just one place. Amylase is a broad name, and there are two types. There are salivary amylase and pancreatic amylase. Okay, so don't just think one place. Okay, what is the substrate? Again, substrate, the thing that is destined to be broken down. So, and we know this is an enzyme. What kind of things do amylase break down? Does amylase break down? So amylase breaks down carbohydrates. And we know examples of carbohydrates is starch and glycogen. Okay, those are two kinds of carbohydrates. Starch is what we find in plants, and glycogen is what we find in animals. Okay, so A, this is correct. This starch is a substrate of amylase. And the source, salivary glands. That is true. So amylase is made from the salivary glands in your mouth. Okay, saliva glands. Think about it. Amylase is in your saliva. Okay, and the pH at which this works best, this enzyme, is pH 7, and we know pH 7 is neutral. And this makes sense because if you stick your hand in your mouth, does your hand burn off due to the acid? Due to the pH? No. That means the pH is okay because your hand isn't reacting to it. So logically, pH 7 should be correct. So this one is most likely correct. Now, why are the rest incorrect? So these look really confusing. If you look at them initially, like, damn, have I even learned about that? So in the IB, they will do a lot of things that will confuse you on purpose, because in theory, you should get this question right just if you know about amylase, if you studied amylase well enough. Because just out of what you learned, you should know A is correct. And immediately these must be wrong if this one is correct, right? So they're going to do a lot of things like this to confuse you, bring up stuff that you never learned, but you should still get the question right just because you should know which one is correct due to the stuff you've learned in class. So I'll tell you why these are wrong. So B is wrong because lignin is a component of a plant. And we actually don't have an enzyme to break it down. We can't break down lignin. Therefore, if amylase can't break down lignin because we have no enzymes that break down lignin. So therefore B is incorrect. Cellulose, same story. We can't break down cellulose. We don't have that enzyme. Cows and stuff like that have enough acidity in their stomach to break it down, but we don't have an enzyme for it. Therefore we can't actually break down cellulose. Glycogen we can, so why is this one wrong? I told you that amylase can break down carbohydrates, which includes starch and glycogen. So why is D wrong? The reason why D is wrong is because the substrate is correct, but the source is wrong. We know that amylase does not come from the kidney. It comes from either your salivary glands or your pancreas, depending on which type we're talking about. In this case, they're saying kidney. Kidney does not make any kind of amylase. Therefore, D is incorrect. So if you get a hard question like this where they bring up words like lignin that you've never heard of, you should know that first of all, you should know that that's probably not the answer because you haven't learned of it. It's not on the syllabus. And on top of that, you should know what the correct answer is based on what you learned, and therefore the rest must be wrong. So this is worst case scenario. You find one answer that you know is correct, and therefore the rest must be wrong, okay? So just bear in mind that they will try and trick you with things like this. So I hope this was useful. I'll probably make another part of more other kind of digestion questions.